Chapter 1, Part 1. The dead leave nothing but doubt. It rained on the afternoon of the funeral. Not a steady drizzle, but heavy drops that hammered against the glass roof of the Wicklow Fold churchyard. The air was damp and misty, making the cemetery seem buried with the man who had just died, Nathaniel Dusk, the head of the oldest estate in the area, a powerful, solitary, and as most whispered behind his back, unreadable man. The coffin was placed in the middle of the sanctuary, covered in smooth ebony, without any decorations, no cross, not a single flower. In the front row, 3 relatives sat with an empty seat between them. Evelyn Caro, his sister, her body seemed to be breaking with each breath, her eyes wide but unfocused. And Ronan Dusk, the recently returned nephew, handsome but cold as stone, nodded as if attending an interview, not a funeral. And Clara Vane, Nathaniel's personal secretary, who had found him dead in his study, clutching a half-torn manuscript in her hands. No one cried. No one read the eulogy. The priest stood in the middle of the reading, his eyes sweeping over the men in black, not reverently, but defensively. This funeral was not mourning. It was observing. A rich death is always an opening act for a script many people want to direct. When the service ended, people walked out quietly. No one spoke. Only the sound of wet slippers as Toby Greaves, the housekeeper, waddled after Clara, pressing a wet piece of paper into her hand. "Don't let them into the library tonight. I saw him scratch something out of his notebook." Clara clutched the piece of paper and stuffed it into her pocket. She didn't look back at Toby. She was used to everyone having secrets in this house, but tonight was the first time she was afraid of someone knowing that she had a secret of her own. At Duskwood House, after the coffin was carried away, everyone gathered in the great hall. Tea was poured, cold cakes, unopened strawberry jam, and hard butter. But what was unusual was no one mentioned the will. That at any funeral where there is an estate, a lawyer usually opens the door, holding a stack of papers, declaring what the deceased has decided to give to whom. Here, there is no paper. Attorney Miles Ternan arrived nearly 30 minutes late. He was soaked and pale. "Traffic jam," he muttered, but no one believed him. He did not bring a briefcase. Do not carry a will. Clara left the crowd, pouring more tea, her hands shaking slightly. She felt someone watching her. Back Ronan. He was leaning against the wall, his eyes staring straight ahead as if he was recording every action. "Do you know how my grandfather died?" Ronan asked. "In my sleep," Clara replied, an answer she had repeated 10 times to the police, the coroner, and the local newspaper. "No," Ronan said slowly. "I asked you if you knew why he died." Clara didn't answer. She knew better than to look at that look, the look of someone who had seen too much blood, or thought about spilling it. Ronan nodded. "I will find out, and I think you are doing the same." Just then, from behind, Evelyn's voice rang out, thin, shrill like cracked glass. "So I just." He should have lived long enough to make amends, but he chose to die, leaving us all sitting here waiting for the money. Everyone turned to look at her. Evelyn chuckled. "Oh, don't look at me like I'm crazy. Nathaniel once said death is the ultimate way to escape responsibility without being blamed." No one laughed. She continued, emphasizing, "But I'll be honest, he was killed." A silence fell like broken glass. Attorney turned and dropped his teacup. Clara clenched the piece of paper Toby gave her in her pocket, feeling like her heart was being pushed out of her chest. Oh. Ronan chuckled, shaking his head. "You're the same as ever." Aunt Evelyn, making a dramatic statement. Evelyn shrugged. "Oh no, my dear." The play does not begin until the audience is in their seats. She turned and walked away, leaving behind a hall full of people trying to smile to hide their confusion and fear. Clara exhaled. Just then, in the empty hallway, she heard someone whispering behind her. "Clara, be careful of the library." She turned back. No one was there, just a foggy mirror. And in the mirror, it seemed like someone else was looking out. Not her. Chapter 1. Part 2. A stray word over tea. Clara stood silently by the mirror, her hand still touching the old wooden frame as if waiting for a response. Outside in the hallway, the sounds of conversation faded away as if carried away by water. A cold breath brushed against the back of her neck, and for a moment she dared not breathe. Then a hand rested lightly on his shoulder. Clara turned around, startled. It was Julian Marr, the blind painter who lived in the attic, his eyes white and his face as bony as a sculpture. He never appeared at events, much less left the upper floor. "The library," he muttered, "is singing." Clara frowned. "What did you say? Can't you hear that?" Julian tilted his head. "The bookshelf. It's shaking." Clara swallowed. Julian had been blind for nearly a decade, but sometimes he knew more than anyone with eyes. "What do you need down here?" she asked. Julian chuckled. "It wasn't me. Someone wanted me down." There was an unfinished story. In the tea room, the atmosphere was both thick and broken. Everyone held a cup of tea, as if it were a talisman against the piercing gazes. Attorney Miles Ternan stood up, cleared his throat, and tried to regain control. "Let me be clear. There is no official will filed in the legal office of Mr. Nathaniel Dusk." Toby Greaves snorted. "It's not that he didn't write a will. It's that he didn't trust anyone." Evelyn put down her teacup with a loud clink. "He wrote," she said, "at least 2 copies I've seen. One for the orphanage, one all for Ronan. I don't know about the others, but I'm sure he's hiding something." "Where?" Ronan asked, his voice sarcastic. "In the grave." "No," Evelyn said slowly, "in what he called the memory room, the West Library." Clara froze in the doorway, just in time to hear that. Her hands clenched in her pocket. Toby's wet note seemed to be getting warmer. "Excuse me," she interrupted. "The library has been locked since Mr. Dusk died." "On his own orders." Evelyn chuckled. "Then why did I see the library lights on at 3 a.m. the other day?" Everyone turned to Clara. One look, not accusing, but waiting. Clara did not answer. She could not say that she had snuck in that night, finding nothing but a folded map placed in the middle of Fact and Fiction in War Memories, the red-circled page, a small room, located below the library. The library doors opened in the afternoon, unannounced. It was Ronan who opened it. No one saw where he got the key. It could have been from Mr. Ternan's cuff, or from Nathaniel's old pocket watch. Clara protested weakly, but fell silent when she saw Ronan open the door with unshaken hands. In the library were the things Clara had seen: ceiling-high bookshelves, walls covered in dark velvet, a large writing desk with locked drawers, and a standing mirror covered in white cloth. Ronan went straight to the mirror and pulled the cloth down. "What are you doing?" Clara asked. "Wait," Ronan replied. "This mirror doesn't reflect images. It reflects memories." He tapped the wooden frame 3 times. A click sounded from behind the bookshelf. "The third bookshelf, from the right, is moving. Behind is a wooden door." "Didn't anyone tell you about this room?" Ronan asked. Clara shook her head. "Well then." Ronan pushed open the door. Perhaps Nathaniel left his last words in a place no one wants to remember. Behind the door was a small, dimly lit room, filled with dust and the smell of rotting wood. In the middle was an armchair. Someone had been sitting there for a long time, and on the table in front of the chair was a tape recorder. Ronan pressed the button. There was a crackling sound. Then a hoarse voice spoke, Nathaniel Dusk's voice. "If you hear this, then I won't be able to keep my last promise. There is a will, but not to divide the money, but to keep the truth buried. I'm not afraid of death. I'm just afraid that you'll live too long without knowing who in this house is the murderer." Oh, the machine stopped. The tape broke. Clara looked at Ronan. Ronan whispered, "Not everyone dies at the right time." Chapter 2. Part 3. Secretary, Painter, and Gardener. 3 days after the funeral. The weather in Wicklow Fold turned unusually cold. The sky was overcast. The wind, carrying the musty smell of doors, closed for too long, as if the house was holding its breath. At Duskwood House, only 3 people remained after the funeral: Clara Vane, Julian Marr, and Toby Greaves. Ronan had disappeared the previous afternoon, and no one knew where he had gone. Clara entered the dining room, where Julian was sitting facing the large window. The dim light cast a powdery white glow over his face. "Where is Ronan?" she asked. Julian didn't turn around. "To the river. Bring the map." "What map?" "The one he took from the first night book." Clara felt her stomach tighten. She had seen that map before, and wondered why it marked the old wine cellar, abandoned since the 1930s. Julian touched the teacup, then pushed it toward Clara. "You didn't sleep last night." Clara was stunned. "How did you know?" "The tea was cold from 2 in the morning. The lipstick is still there." "You went back to the library, right?" Clara did not reply. Julian smiled. She looked for the metal box under the bookshelf, but it wasn't there. "Are you following me?" "No." Julian touched his temple. "I heard." Clara left the dining room and walked out into the back garden. Each step on the damp grass reminded her of the sound of rain on the church's stained glass roof that fateful day. Toby Greaves was busy trimming the black roses by the hedge. "Were you the last person to see Mr. Dusk alive?" Clara asked. Toby looked up, eyes startled. "Do you think I killed him?" "I think. Maybe you know who did it." Toby stood up straight, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I'm just a gardener. I'm not smart enough to kill someone and cover it up with books or recordings." Clara stared at him. "But you were smart enough to know that the library cellar door led out into the garden, and quick enough to burn a will before they opened that room." Toby didn't reply, but his eyes began to waver. "Do you think Miss Dusk's death was a relief?" Clara asked. "No," Toby whispered. "It's part of the game he created. and we're all pieces. That evening, Clara was walking down the east corridor when she received a strange call. The phone rang 3 times. She picked up the phone. No one answered. Then a male voice, hoarse, whispered, "There were 3 survivors, but only one remembered the truth." Nasabin. And the third never forgot the smell of burning paper. Phone off. Clara pulled her hand away from the receiver, sweat pouring from her forehead. That same night, Julian disappeared. No one knew when he left home. His room was locked from the inside. When they broke down the door, they found a wooden stick lying on its side next to a chair. The window was open, and on the table, a charcoal sketch of a faceless person standing in the basement of the library, next to a flickering lamp and an open suitcase. In the suitcase were half-burnt pages. Clara stood in Julian's room, her heart pounding. The drawing on the wall was signed in pencil. Not everyone who sees remembers, and not everyone who doesn't see forgets. She turned to Toby, who was staring at the painting. "Do you think Julian knows who the killer is?" she asked. Toby didn't answer. He just pointed to the corner of the painting, where a small sign was hidden, the letter R, nested in an arch. Clara was stunned. Ronan. But the next morning, Toby's body was found in the old wine cellar, neck broken. No signs of a struggle. Still clutching an unsent letter to the man in the mirror. Chapter 3. Part 4. The will was never read. The sun rose, but did not rise. The sky was covered with a thick gray mist like wet fur. The light stifled before it could penetrate the glass doors of Duskwood House. Clara sat alone in the library, holding a cup of tea she had forgotten to drink. On the table before her was the only thing left of Julian Marr, a charcoal sketch folded in half, and an old copy of paper with the edges scorched. She opened it. It is a will. There was no legal stamp, no clear date, just an opening line scrawled in blue ink. I, Nathaniel Dusk, do not write this to share money, but to return memories. The will is a long statement, interspersed with memories and regrets. I had a son. No one knew about it, except his mother, whom I drove away from this country. It doesn't have my name, but it came back. I saw it in Ronan's eyes. Clara clutched the paper, her heart pounding. Ronan, not his nephew. I left this house, not for them to fight over, but for them to face each other. Kirshras, for them to live in my memories. I have hurt them all, but I want one person only to know the truth. Clara, if you're reading this, it means I didn't live long enough to tell you you're not a secretary. You're Evelyn's daughter. Clara stopped breathing. The words in front of her blurred. I figured that out from a sample of Evelyn's hair. You're the reason Evelyn came back here after nearly 20 years. And I think you have a right to know this before everyone else does. I'm sorry, if I may. The will stopped there. No signature. There is no division of assets. There is only truth and blood. A slight noise came from behind Clara. She turned. Ronan was standing in the doorway, pale-faced, holding a wooden stick. Julian Marr's. "Oh, where did you find it?" Clara asked, her voice low. Ronan did not answer immediately. He stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the drawing, then stopping at the will. I guess you read it. Clara nodded. And I guess you knew all along. Ronan sat down across from her. I knew he was more than just your grandfather, but I didn't expect he would write it all to you. Clara pursed her lips. Because you trust me not to kill him. You think I killed him? Ronan asked, his eyes darkening. No, Clara replied. But I think you know who did it. There was a silence. Then Ronan said softly, Toby knew too much. And Julian, he used to draw faces he never saw. That was how he saw the killer. And he drew it. Clara stared. You see the picture? No, Ronan replied. I saw Julian burn it. Before he disappeared, Ronan put the stick on the table. You know, he said slowly, there are secrets that should not be spoken. They should only be felt, like blood on the wall, like the wind in the chimney, like a voice in the mirror. Clara shivered. Ronan stood up. There is someone else who knows, and he doesn't live in this house, but he will be here before dark. Who is it? Clara asked. Beatrice. Ronan looked her straight in the eye. Her mother, Chapter 4, Part 5. The one who returned from the grave, buried memories. Clara stood alone in the west garden as the shadows of the afternoon began to lengthen like scratches on the walls of time. The wind carried the scent of old ashes, as if secrets were trembling to awaken beneath the ground that had been frozen for too long. The sound of wheels hitting gravel echoed from the iron gate. A black antique car stopped. The door opened. The woman stepped out in a long burgundy coat, her face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. She didn't look around, just walked straight through the gate as if she still had the key in her hand, as if she had never left. Evelyn Caro. Clara's mother. Clara stood waiting on the steps. Evelyn approached, stopping before her, her eyes unwavering. You are taller than I thought, she said, and colder than I was at your age. What are you doing here? Clara asked, her voice low. I didn't come to apologize, Evelyn replied. I came for Nathaniel's last game, and for what he kept hidden in the old cellar. Clara paused. You know that cellar? Evelyn smiled, not the gentle smile of a mother, but the smile of someone who has walked through doors others dare not open. I grew up here, my child, before he knew what sin was. So, why did you leave? Evelyn looked up at the old roof, her voice breaking. Because I did the unforgivable. I loved the man who killed my father. The living room was silent as the two sat across from each other. Clara placed the crumpled will on the table. Evelyn, not looking at it. You know everything, said Clara, don't you? Evelyn nodded. Nathaniel once said, I don't need to kill anyone to bury a secret. I just need time and the silence of the living. He was right. So, who killed him? Clara asked bluntly. Evelyn closed her eyes. No one. He orchestrated his own death, planned it, laid the trail, distributed the wrong keys. He died the way he lived in control of it all. Clara felt the dizziness spreading from her temples down her neck. What about Toby Julian? Evelyn opened her eyes, her vision clouded. Toby knows more than he should. And Julian, he's not dead. Clara was stunned. What? Evelyn smiled faintly. He was never truly blind. Night fell, swiftly and coldly, like a knife. Evelyn led Clara down to the old wine cellar, her hands running through the cracks in the walls, as if searching for memories with her fingertips. They came to an iron door that had been welded shut from the outside. Evelyn took out a key from a chain around her neck. The door opened. A small room. No wine. No dust, just a locked wooden chest. "What's in there?" Clara asked. Evelyn did not answer. She opened the lid of the chest. Inside, a file. Dozens of old photos. And a worn film with a handwritten label 1944. Operation Fog. "This is why I left," Evelyn whispered. "Not because of you. Because of my sins." Being captured by Nathaniel with a camera. Clara picked up a photograph. It showed a very young woman, Evelyn, standing next to a man in German uniform. "That was your father," Evelyn said. Her eyes never leaving the past. A spy, a traitor. "And Nathaniel used that to manipulate the remaining years of my life." Clara put the photo down. "And now what? What are you going to do with this truth?" Evelyn looked straight at her, her eyes sharp as knives. "Show us." "I don't need to do anything. You're the one keeping it." Chapter 5, Part 6, Unclaimed Mailbox. The next morning, the sky was as thick as thin ink. Fog blanketed the front garden, obscuring the path to the family cemetery. Clara walked down to the main hall, holding Nathaniel's notebook that she'd found in the trunk the night before, not a diary, but a list of names. The first name crossed out Evelyn Caro, second name Julian Marr, third name Ronan Dusk. And finally, Clara, the line is still uncrossed, but has a question mark behind it, as if Nathaniel himself is still unsure whether she will be the heir or the successor. Clara held the book, standing still. Then the doorbell rang. A postman in a waterproof jacket, holding a soaked ivory envelope, looked at Clara with blank eyes. "This letter was sent 2 weeks ago, but the recipient address says sole survivor of Duskwood House, so we have to wait." Clara received the letter, her hands shaking slightly. Signed MT. No postmark, no return address. She opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of parchment as thin as old man's skin. The handwriting slanted and the ink smudged. "If you're reading this, he chose you. I can't say my name, because he's long dead. But I was the one who wrote the first will, before he rewrote it all. You don't know. Clara, people think Nathaniel manipulates people with money. That's wrong. He manipulates them with fear of not knowing who he is. Evelyn wasn't the only one who left. There was another. The one everyone believed died in the war." Clara read the last line again. "That person is your father." Clara dropped the letter. The walls around her seemed to close in. Everything she had ever known, ever hated, ever remembered was out of place. She looked up. Evelyn was standing at the top of the stairs, her eyes as usual cold, but something like fear. "She knew he was alive," Clara said, without waiting for confirmation, "and she never told him." Evelyn did not reply. Clara stepped closer. "You hid it because you were afraid Mr. Nathaniel would kill him," Evelyn whispered. "No, I'm afraid. If he comes back, you'll be more like him than like me." Clara was stunned. The answers faded away. Only one thing remained. Her father was still alive, and he sent her a letter before Nathaniel died. Meanwhile, at the post office in a town outside Wicklow Fold, an old man with ink-stained sleeves placed another letter on the conveyor belt. The clerk asked, "What is the sender's name?" He shook his head. "It doesn't matter," then turned away, limping, one eye wearing sunglasses. The silver ring on the left hand has an embossed letter D. Chapter 6. Part 7. The Final Inheritance. Clara sat in Nathaniel's old study. On the walls were oil paintings she had never noticed before, but now, in the pale yellow light, they stood out more clearly. 4 portraits, but only 3 of them had faces. The 4th person in the middle was just a black mass covering his face, like a mirror without reflection. She turned to the safe in the corner. This time, the lock had been forced open from the inside. The door was ajar. Inside, an 8mm projector and a roll of film bearing the words, "The Last Inheritance." Clara turned on the projector. The image appeared on the old cloth screen. First scene, young Nathaniel standing in front of Duskwood House, next to a man wearing sunglasses, face unknown. Transition scene. A woman Evelyn leaves in the middle of the night, holding a small bundle, a baby. Next, Julian Marr, not yet blind, is sitting in the studio drawing. In the mirror, there is another person standing behind him, but that shadow does not appear in the actual room. Clara held her breath. Final scene. Nathaniel sits in this room, his eyes looking straight into the camera lens. If anyone finds this film, it means I have failed. I created this house like a maze to keep them there, to kill each other with silence and suspicion. But I never expected there would be one person who never left. Clara, if you see this, remember the mirror does not reflect the soul. It reflects the person who is looking at it wrongly. The film ended. The wall in front of Clara suddenly lit up. A piece of old mirror behind the projection screen reflected her, but the face is not clear. That night, Evelyn knocked on Clara's door. "He came back," she said, her hands shaking. "My father." Evelyn nodded. "He didn't come to see you. He came to get back what he had hidden in the silver box, what Nathaniel had stolen." Clara frowned. "You mean the documents?" "No," Evelyn whispered. "A photograph of the murderer before the murder. Ronan found them in the library. Someone just broke the hatch," he said, his face pale. They ran down. The iron door flew open. Inside, there was no one. There was only an envelope placed on the cold stone table. "I leave nothing behind. I take nothing. I just want to see the eyes of my blood one last time." Under the letter was a pair of old sunglasses. Clara picked it up with trembling hands. Evelyn bent down and took out a small piece of paper from the inside of her glasses. A hand-drawn, very old drawing of a child sitting on the lap of a faceless man. Clara realized it was herself. The next dawn, Duskwood House was sealed off by order of the town. All assets left unclaimed. Will invalidated for mental abnormality. Clara stood by the iron fence, looking back one last time. Ronan asked, "Do you regret it?" Clara replied, "No. There are houses that should not be inherited. They should be buried with their secrets." Evelyn chuckled. "Like humans." As the 3 left, a door at the back of the house opened slightly. In the darkness, an old man in a gray coat stepped out. He looked around, slowly placing the silver box on the steps, then pull out a match and strike it. Duskwood House engulfed in flames. Epilogue. Faceless mirror. 1 year later, Wicklow, Foldtown Library. Dim lighting over rows of worn bookshelves. In the farthest corner, where few people went, a young woman was consulting the archives. Her hair was tied back, her hands covered in thin gloves. Her name on the reading list, Clara E. Caro. Before her was a confidential file dated Duskwood Incident, file not to be opened. She did not read it immediately. She just put her hand on the cover, felt the coldness of the old paper, then took a piece of broken mirror from her pocket. It only reflected a part of her face, the rest, as empty as the question she carried with her all her life. If I reflect no one, then who am I? Outside, the wind began to blow hard. On the cover of the file, the words faded away with each gust of wind. We do not inherit wealth. We inherit sin and the choice to keep it or burn it.